Welcome to this special edition of Daily Pulse, where we keep your finger on the pulse of the latest breaking news and the news they're keeping from you. I'm your host, Maria Zeee. A quick reminder to head on over to free speech platform Rumble to watch our full show. And if you're not subscribed to our channel yet, do so right now to catch our no-holds-barred reporting brought to you by The Vigilant Fox and Zeee Media. We reported to you last week that a coalition of content creators are heading to Kentucky to encourage voters to head to the polls for what many view as one of the most consequential elections of our time. We are, of course, talking about the 4th Congressional District of Kentucky and the race between Thomas Massie and Ed Galbraith. One of the reasons this race matters so much is actually data centers. Why? Because we have an entire political class completely ignoring the will of the people who recently tried to ram through immunity for data centers, essentially allowing them to do whatever they want, take whatever farmland and family homes they want, make us sick, and yes, data centers are very dangerous to our health, and allow them to face no consequences for it. Like the vaccine shield Big Pharma has, where they can literally kill you with their products and you and your family can do nothing about it. The same was about to happen with data centers, and Thomas Massie stopped it. That's just one of many reasons people are flooding to Kentucky right now. Hey, here's a man who's listening to the people rather than steamrolling us, and they're spending over $25 million to stop him from listening to and representing us. There's something very wrong here. Shannon, and Kristen, Meghan have been on the ground. Kristen in particular understands the health impacts of data centers. She'll talk us through that. They join us with an update from Kentucky after a quick word from one of the sponsors who make our independent reporting possible. Imagine being in your 20s, newly married, and given just 60 days to live by the Mayo Clinic after a grueling cancer diagnosis. That was Rick Hill's reality in 1975 until a letter led him to a Tijuana clinic. There, he embraced Laetrile B17 supplements, enzyme therapies, a raw organic diet, and detox protocols. Within just 3 weeks, Rick was off morphine, gaining strength, and today, in his 70s, he's been cancer-free for 50 years. His story, featured on the Daily Pulse, proves the power of natural alternatives. Now, thousands have followed suit. Richardson Nutritional Center's Laetrile B17 and enzyme therapies paired with organic produce kits and detox support from trusted retailers are transforming lives. Rick reports even people who are suffering from the shots are achieving the same results he did. To use the same protocol that saved Rick Hill's life and receive a free copy of his book, go to rncstore.com/pages/ricksbundle and use the discount code PULSE for an additional 10% off your first order. That link again is rncstore.com/pages/ricksbundle, and remember to use discount code PULSE for an additional 10% off your first order. Shannon, and Kristen, Meghan, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you making the time.
You're welcome. We're glad to be here.
Yes, thank you so much.
It's great to see you both. I know you're very, very busy out there doing incredible work in Kentucky. We do want to talk a little bit about that today. Amazing footage that's come out over the weekend. So many people gathering in support of Thomas Massie and the efforts that you all and Tiffany Cianci, God bless her, are putting in over there. Let me just ask, and you can each answer, take turns. Why are you there?
Why don't we let Kristen and Meghan go first, and then I'll
Yeah, so I have been in the Liberty movement for over 20 years. I was politically homeless and found Dr. Ron Paul. And when he retired and left Congress in 2012, he passed that torch onto Congressman Thomas Massie, who's been a champion for everything MAHA, America First, MAGA, before it was a thing, before it was cool. He's just a true constitutionalist. And as a veteran, that's important to me, for people to continue to uphold their oath that cannot be bought and paid, and do the right things without fearing defamatory smear campaigns.
Right.
Yeah. And, from my perspective, what sealed the deal for me, Maria, was the fact that so many outside foreign interests, foreign governments, super PACs, dumping, $20 million in a congressional district to take out one of the most conservative and America First constitutional members of the House of Representatives for his willingness to speak up about what is really going on in Washington, D.C., and the dark money that is used by organizations to influence our representatives to vote against the influence of Americans. And when I realized how much effort they were going to put into that here in Kentucky, I really wanted not only to support Thomas Massie, because I do, but it was more about beating this Goliath, this massive, and we've seen this in congressional districts across the country. We've seen this in terms of influencing the votes on the floor of the House and the Senate, to fund initiatives, to fund wars that are against the interests of the American people. And the war in Iran is probably the most unpopular wars that has ever been waged. I mean, the disapproval numbers on this action are through the roof, yet our representatives, our president, they're not listening to us. It's because they're listening to the billionaires. So I saw this as it's an inflection point. It's a moment in history. It's a moment in time where we have the opportunity to go in and go up against Goliath. And that's what Tiffany Cianci put together. 30 influencers, independent, across the board, with a combined 40 million followers in terms of reach. Can we do this, right? Can we get in here, put together a coalition? None of us are being paid. We're all doing this on our own dime. We drove down planes, trains, and automobiles to get here, and we've been working 24/7 nonstop. I'll be down here 7 days total, 2 days of travel, 5 days on the ground, and we're going to push forth as much as we can. We can get into what's happening a little later, after we talk about those data centers, but this is potentially the most important political election in the next, I would say, decade, maybe two.
Yeah, it could spark the next movement, and that's why us being here, we have a bunch of people knocking doors too, like Stewart Rhodes. A whole bunch of veterans, people are still driving in, and the goal is for our content to motivate more people to come here and knock doors and still donate to that MassieMoneyBomb.com. So, and for me, the huge fight across America has been, why do we have these hyperscale AI data centers? Mm-hmm. And when I tell people, do you know who stopped that blanket immunity that was trying to be pushed on them for any human and environmental impacts on communities? He made sure that didn't happen. So when you see these false attacks on why he votes no, people are forgetting sometimes voting no has a better outcome. And almost always, that's exactly what Thomas Massie is doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I had someone argue with me recently, and I try not to engage in arguments in comments, although I really, my heart is to win people over and get them to think critically. It's always been my mission. And, it was like the standard lines, he betrayed President Trump and all this sort of stuff. And I just think that is really bizarre that that's become the point here, when really it should be, did you or did you not betray your voters? And when we look at all of these people that are turning against Thomas Massie, they're betraying their voters who spent their time and their money campaigning for certain people, supporting certain people, going out to the polls to vote for them, only to be shafted in the end, with policies that you did not vote for. And that's just not what I see when it comes to Thomas Massie and these over $25 million now being dedicated to defeat someone who actually represents their district is a real referendum on the future of American politics, in my opinion, which is why this is so important. And I don't think you're overstating it by saying this is one of the most important elections in modern history, if not the most important, given the direction in which MAGA versus America first and this sort of discourse is happening. So I'm fully with you in the sense that we need to support the will of the people versus the will of the billionaires. And now on the topic of data centers, because this is so vital, here's Ann Vandersteel talking about this. She says, if it's official, Trump wants data centers, feels like a redirect to digital money. Pair these with the Genius Clarity Acts, and you now have track and trace digital currency, but not under the globalist brand CBDC, all reported to the IRS. You're welcome. Of course, she's talking about this particular executive order to accelerate federal permitting of data center infrastructure. Now, when I saw this and the huge efforts, by the way, in the bill, big, beautiful bill initially, to give immunity to these companies, these AI companies and data center builders. I was horrified. And this is, people will say, oh, Massie is a grandstander. He voted against this big, beautiful bill. I'm so glad he did vote the way that he did,
Yeah.
because we don't want that in there. So a long intro, but please go chime in.
Well, I'll let Kristen, Meghan talk about the dangers of the data centers, because that's really your specialty and expertise. But I can speak to the politics of it. And what is happening is so incredibly interesting, how everything is just coming together at this one moment. The American people hate the data centers. They despise the data centers. We are seeing footage from across the country, small towns, moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, whole communities coming out and raging against them, because the American people know there is absolutely no benefit to them whatsoever in the creation and running of these data centers. In fact, the data centers are critical to installing and creating the digital slave state. They need to compute the data. They need the compute power. And it's not to help humans. It is to track and trace everything, to compute that data, to apply AI so that they can, drive the final nail in the coffin on human liberty and freedom. That is the purpose of the data centers. They're not creating jobs. They're poisoning the community. They're a scar on the face of our planet. I mean, there's just nothing good. And they're wildly unpopular, but they don't care.
Yeah.
And see, that's why this election is so important, because what we're seeing is that it doesn't matter what we say. Zoning boards and town boards are approving these data centers against the will of the people. They don't care. There's a hubris. There's an attitude among the billionaires and the politicians that they own that they can do anything to us, and there's nothing we can do. And that's why they're propping up a corpse in the candidate of Ed Gallerine. It's almost as if it's the perfect disillusionment campaign and disenfranchisement of the people, because they're basically saying to us, we can run a corpse. We can run the worst candidate on the face of the planet against the most popular candidate in his district in America, and we're still going to win, and there's nothing you can do about it. We can't let this happen. And if we allow them to do this to Thomas Massie, we're going to get the data centers, and we're going to get a whole host of candidates and politicians that are bought and paid off by these billionaires. And that's why this is, in this moment, so important.
Yeah, so it's very reminiscent when Shannon was talking about, what they snuck into that big, beautiful bill, and why Massie voted no is that blanket protection, and it's to remove local control. And that's exactly what they're doing with his election. They're removing the will of the people in this community who cannot raise, $25+ million in small rural Kentucky.
Right.
But if you want to dive into they are mass surveillance centers. But I want to clarify something. People have said to me, well, Kristen, there have been data centers for decades. You're right. And they're very, very, very small. They don't require being hooked up to a substation. They don't use a bunch of water. They're just storage for banks and hospitals. We're talking about hyperscale data centers that are not like your normal Amazon warehouse or some industrial commercial building. These are massive stains on the heartland of America. And when I triage different industrial, so just so your audience understands, I'm a 24-year senior industrial hygienist and environmental specialist. I'm the civilian equivalent of OSHA, EPA, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And I spent 9 years on active duty working in bioenvironmental engineering. So my job is to know what everything happening in an occupational setting, how is that affecting workers and possibly community public health. So when I am looking at the worst case hazard, yes, everyone is talking about the water, but the one thing they're ignoring is something called tonal noise.
Yes.
Now, tonal noise, you will hear these developers, because I go to their meetings, and they say, just so everyone understands, when you're talking about noise you can hear, that is measured in decibels A. So that's dBA. So they try to tell you, well, it's 55 dBA at the fence, which is not considered hazardous noise. I don't care about the noise you can hear. Tonal noise is noise that you feel with biological impacts, and it targets expectant mothers. It rises their cortisol levels and increases their maternal fetal heart rate, which can result in early term labor and low birth weight. Now, we all know who are they seeking out? They're seeking out the weak zoning laws and the farmers. Well, tonal noise impacts the livestock and horses. So if you're an equestrian farmer, rancher, you are going to deal with mating cycles being disrupted. It causes psychological and physiological impacts on those livestock and animals. It also can raise their cortisol levels. And our farmers watching know they have to test the stress responses and cortisol levels of their cows and cattle because it can disrupt milk production and the quality of the meat. So there's also a huge impact on the average human. So you have people who are neurodivergent, who are very sensitive already. So this is going to wreak havoc because what it does is tonal noise puts your body in flight or fight mode constantly. And let me just go back to what I told you. I know I'm being long-winded here, but this is very important.
Go, girl, go.
When I am calculating dose of hazards in a workplace, it is all the science of decades is based on an 8-hour exposure. We are now taking industrial exposures and putting them in residential communities, and we are bypassing the 8 hours. We are talking 24/7. There's no break. It keeps happening. And how is this tonal noise occurring? It's all of the fans and the electricity and all of the transmission lines and everything. The extremely low frequency from electromagnetic fields causes the tonal noise. This tonal noise, by the way, farmers, there's something called bioacoustics and acoustic ecology. You can actually ruin your crop turnout because I'm sure people have seen videos where they play classical music to help dying plants or crops.
Yeah.
This is a real thing. So this is an economic collapse on our farmers. The human and environmental impacts are not negligible. They're very serious. So when you have OSHA and the EPA designed to help you in the workplace and protect you, who in the hell is protecting you in the community? So that's another thing. They're getting a pass, and there are no OSHA or EPA standards that track this type of 24-hour exposure. So it is a new hazard. So let me tell you right now, if anyone tells you we're following the standards, absence of standards is not an absence of risk.
Right.
So you need to light a fire under the butts of your public health officials because their job is to protect human health in the community.
Yeah,
Amen.
absolutely. I've not heard anything from RFK Jr. on this topic. I know that previously he was talking about the risks of 5G. The risks of a data center are infinitely worse, and not a peep from him. Not a peep from many of these Maha leaders who transitioned to talking to us about food dye and pretty much nothing else. And it's really, I'm just, to be honest with you, I'm pretty disgusted at the lack of attention from these people that were voted in. And the picks that they picked to represent health, not focusing on any of these things. I mean, it's great. We got some tips to eat liver because it's cheaper than beef. How about, and mind you, I've got nothing against liver, but is that the standard? This is what people were voted in for. Let's ban some red food dye in the future, by the way, 2027, which means they get to keep putting out something that we know is poison for the next 2 years. And they can work it out by 2027, which by the time will probably be repealed anyway. No focus at all on the damage of these data centers and what it's going to do to our food supply. If we're going to focus on metabolic health, how about we focus on the food supply impacts? I mean, the list really goes on and on. Thomas Massie recently did something to protect communities against this. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, that's another thing. If he loses this seat, and I pray that he doesn't, I believe God is on our side. If he does not win this community, this congressional district 4 in Kentucky, he sits on 3 key committees, and the House, I believe it's the Judiciary Committee. He was able to stop, again, making sure he prevented, yes, he stopped the glyphosate immunity. He stopped the AI data center immunity, kind of like what we see with the whole vaccine issue, that these manufacturers are immune from accountability. And they try to do this. And that should be a red flag. Because I'm sorry, we are not we are at war in the home front, and we are not the cannon fodder. And the important thing is you mentioned those 5G towers, they're becoming 8G now. And the thing is all this tech, it's coming too fast. I'm not anti-tech and I'm not anti-AI, but there are way better ways to do this. It's not based on an organic demand, it's based on contracts. But when you bring up all the things that are going around, Wi-Fi, 5G, data centers, hyperscale AI data centers, and solar farms, which also create total noise, we need to look at the synergistic toxicity. And it's when you have multiple different sources that affect the same body systems or organs, it increases that dose. So we have also, I just came from Kansas with my colleague, Tammy Clark. We came from Kansas, and they're trying to put 3 hyperscale data centers right next to each other. So then you have to look at the cumulative impact.
Yeah, of
It's
course.
insane.
It is
I'd like to-
insane. Go on, Shannon.
Well, and I'd like to look at MAHA, the organization of Make America Healthy Again, which was essentially a political organization that grew out of the medical freedom community, which was, created in the dark days of 2020 and in the lockdowns of 2020. And, the fact that MAHA is being very quiet about this, Thomas Massie, if people don't recall, was the only member of Congress in the House of Representatives and the Senate that traveled back to Washington, D.C. to force a vote to authorize the lockdowns of 2020. So many of the problems that we are facing today are rooted in that disastrous decision. The inflation, the health impact, the corruption, all of it coming out of what was done to us then. And it was Thomas Massie. He was the original MAHA. He was the first MAHA, and he was the only person. There are a lot of people that are operating today that grew businesses out of the medical freedom movement, that grew platforms and organizations out of the medical freedom movement, and they are silent right now. Some of the biggest voices that were giving us the truth about the shots and the lockdowns and the masking and helping Americans rally across the country to wrestle ourselves out of those dystopian fascistic lockdowns. They are silent right now, Maria. We're not hearing from them at all. And it's really disappointing to me. And I know that everyone out there knows who I'm talking about. The biggest names in medical freedom, those who championed Donald Trump, right, got political and got out and drove out the vote to push Donald Trump over the finish line, which he is now betraying. And Bobby Kennedy, in his position of power at HHS, is also in many ways betraying. So here we have the one guy who is so consistent in standing up for us and the things that we hold important. And rather than helping him, they're sitting on the sidelines. And I really want to make a call today to everyone in the medical freedom community, those of you with big platforms, those of you who loved Thomas Massie before Donald Trump hated him. I am begging you to reconsider your silence and to get up and stand up. We have less than 30 hours.
Yeah.
Right? Less than 24 hours before the polls open up. And it is razor thin, Maria. It's razor thin. And that's because of that, 25 million. It's going to be $35 million when all is said and done. They are just absolutely, it's the most unholy alliance of big pharma, big tech, big billionaire, APAC, the military industrial complex, the medical industrial complex, all of them coming together in this massive effort to not just shut down Thomas Massie, but to shut down all of us. And that's why we're here.
And if I can just pause you there, that is a very, very important point. This isn't just about shutting down Thomas Massie, it's about shutting down all of us, because we have a person. And again, mind you, I'm not one of these sycophants that if Thomas Massie did a 180 on us tomorrow, I would still be championing Thomas Massie, because
Right.
I'm not loyal to a person. I'm loyal to principles, and thus the reason that I'm supportive of Thomas Massie winning this race is because this is from what I've seen, a very principled individual, and that should be the purpose of supporting political candidates and political races and our activism and journalism. It's about principles, and when people betray those principles, it is justified and actually morally required of us to call it out, right? It's actually your role as a constituent, as a taxpayer, as a person living on this earth, right? So
Maria, this wasn't a simple, just to reiterate what you're saying, this was not a simple decision for me. I've had a platform for 13 years. I started my show 13 years ago. And in those 13 years, I have never, ever endorsed or supported a national candidate. I have always been independent. I'm not left or right, Democrat or Republican. And I have done that, mainly because I haven't ever really found a candidate that I found worthy in terms of getting behind. So this is the first time in my 13-year history that not only am I getting behind Thomas Massie as a candidate, but I got in my car and drove 8 hours down here, leaving my family for 7 days to do it. That's not that's not something I would normally do, but that's how strongly and how passionate I am about, to your point, not Thomas Massie. It's the principle of the matter.
Right.
And, we just need to remember that as we make these decisions.
Yeah, and I had just came from Kansas. My flight was delayed. I don't even know what I threw in my suitcase. And I drove here in a monsoon, and I showed up basically in a potato sack.
Great.
And to bring up the whole issue of Maha, they give us, and I'm grateful for the changes that they are doing, but it's like they're giving us the appetizer, and I want the full meal.
Yes.
At this point, you've been there long enough. Let's invoke change. So when we're talking about these data centers, another issue, a lot of people know about the water, but they forget the amount of diesel generators. Yes, people have been using diesel generators on farms and industry, but the amount of diesel generators that they need they have to do weekly or monthly testing. And we're talking about some sites have 100 to 200 giant diesel generators that emit carcinogenic volatile organic compounds. And something many people know, if they're familiar with what happened in East Palestine, Ohio, dioxins. Dioxins are a byproduct of toxicants that are man-made hazards when you have combustion. So now you just have people downwind of, just on their farm. Now you have these dioxins and carcinogens. And one thing I want to add too is that tonal noise, different than audible noise, it actually goes farther. The attenuation gets carried through the ground, through the compacted soil, which data centers do. Building structures. And then when I came from Kansas, we could actually see miles upon miles of transmission lines. And it really hit us. We were like, oh my gosh, they've been planning this for years. And the issue is tonal noise goes further at night because it's cold on the ground, hotter up in the air. And it can, if you buy a data center, because people ask me, Kristen, what's the safe setback? And I said, if anyone tells you a safe distance, they're lying to you, because there's so many factors and site specific. But what I'm trying to tell you is what I saw in Kansas. If a data center is here and it's cold at night and it's warmer up high, that tonal noise can go 10 to 12 miles and affect people that don't even live by the data center. So there's no safe zone because of how tonal noise acts. And also, Maria, it's the hardest to engineer out of a facility.
There is a serious problem with health insurance in America. Over 200,000 Americans per year are driven into bankruptcy due to health events despite having health insurance. On average, 20% of people have their claims denied altogether, leaving them and their families helpless, not to mention the additional out-of-pocket expenses, despite dumping thousands of dollars per year into unreliable insurance and deductible payments. Well, did you know there's an alternative? In the midst of all of this, a revolutionary model has emerged that is resulting in just shy of 100% of medical bills being funded, and at literally a fraction of the cost. It's called Crowd Health, with over 28,000 members helped with medical bills, a 99.9% funding success, and over $56 million in medical bills saved. This alternative method of healthcare is sweeping the nation, and people need to know this option exists for them and their loved ones. Crowd Health is not insurance. You can opt out of the broken system and take your power back. Get started today for $99 per member per month for the first 3 months, which includes your member fee and Crowd Health contributions, by using the code PULSE at joincrowdhealth.com/pulse. That's joincrowdhealth.com/pulse. Remember to use code PULSE. Let me ask you, Kristen, because you bring up such a good point about the amount of diesel, and I think people don't often put a lot of thought into the amount that's needed. We're in the middle, we're told, of a global oil shortage and a crisis that's actually going to lead to famine in multiple countries. And we said, this is a really good time to build more data centers that need these resources that humans are struggling to access. I've heard about, India is now throwing their nation into lockdown, telling them they need to work from home again, not drive their cars. We've heard about the head of the European Central Bank saying we need to move to food rationing because of the global oil shortage. So simultaneously, while we're being told all these things, we're going to dedicate all of those very scarce resources to data centers. Is that right? No one has addressed this topic.
Yes. I mean, even people all over the country right now are dealing with droughts, and they're being told, don't water your lawn on this day. Don't put your air conditioning below this temperature. And I say, screw you, because you are giving blanket protections. And just so you know, in the event of a blackout, that's what those diesel generators are for. But it's not only when there's a blackout, it's when the grid is about to collapse because of these hyperscale AI data centers. Not only that, they're putting them in places that have strained electrical grids. And what people may not know about electrical grids across the country, I live in Michigan. We're tied to something called MISO, and we may consent to it here, but another state in Canada who we're partnered with may not consent. And then we can have contracts violated, and then we're going to lose our power. But furthermore,
That's happening in Lake
you know,
Tahoe, by the way. Sorry, let me pause you
Yes,
there. It's happening in
horrifying.
Lake
And they're
Tahoe,
putting-
nearly 50,000 people being told as of next year, so 12 months from now, you don't have power anymore. And people are saying, well, that's good. We
Unbelievable.
can get our own. Okay, yeah, it's that quick, is it? It's that quick to build an entire electrical grid and work all that out. Okay, and where are you going to get the resources that you need in the midst of this global crisis, by the way? Sorry, please go on.
No, I was just going to say, and the same thing goes for they're putting these seeded right on aquifers that are very strained. And they have these, people want to think about fires that can occur at these hyperscale data centers. I mean, we're talking, you're not going to recover, and you're going to look at Superfund sites because of the amount of fire suppressant called halon that they would need. They're by these substations. And that's why a lot of ways that people are trying to stop this, and I actually have a pinned symposium video, I believe. If it's not pinned, I'll do it after this interview, of a symposium my colleague and I did to provide solutions, because I am solution based. But when you put these requirements in, change your noise standards to reflect tonal noise. Make sure that you have decommissioning agreements. So, hey, we're going to need $45 million from you up front in the event that you abandon this when they are eventually put up in outer space.
Right.
Who's going to take care of this? Because you're not just leaving an eyesore, you're leaving toxicants and waste products that, you know, you can't restore the land. And that's the false promises. So let me tell you, farmers, don't sign these NDAs, say no. The ROI, the return of investment is not there. And the one thing I will say, Maria, for people, if you are scared of this impacting your area, monthly, weekly, different for every state and county, look at who is filing for approval for diesel generator air permits, because only so many are allowed, because it's called PM 2.5. Real quick, it's particulate matter that is less than or equal to 2.5 microns, 30 times smaller than a human hair. That gets deep into the lung. It's very hard to filter out. And with weather, it dissipates through the rainwater and gets into the groundwater and soil.
Crazy.
You know, it's really this conversation and the detail that you've gone into. And by the way, the video is not pinned at the time of this recording, so if you can pin that afterwards, that'd be great for people to go and watch. The detail that we've gotten into is something that communities are not having this explained to them. No one in Congress or in politics at all, other than Thomas Massie, I've heard talking about these things. No one is explaining to communities how bad this is going to be for them. They're promised jobs. I actually put out a post the other day and I said, has anyone actually been in one of these new hyperscale data centers? Anyone at all? Just let me know. And someone answered and said, yes, I was recently. No humans, just what seems like miles of servers. So once they're built, yeah, you'll get a job to build them, and then that's it. There's no humans inside because they don't need us. The goal is to obliterate us out of relevance.
Yeah.
Well, I have to tell you something ironic real quick.
Yes.
There are usually about 5 to 10 people who actually do work on site for security reasons and maintenance. And guess what? Their offices are padded with engineering controls to protect them from the contaminants and the tonal noise.
Oh, okay. So that's great. No one in the community is having that offered to them. I didn't see an executive order for that. So the communities are protected.
A rubber room to protect them. That's
so protection for them, but not the community.
So my point in saying all of this is that the two are intricately related. You have what I see as an absolute assault on humanity happening right now in the form of pharmaceuticals, in the form of data centers, in the form of an attack on farmers, something else that Thomas Massie is just stopped again. You know, for all the people that say he's blocking the Trump administration's agendas. Well, yeah, good. I'm glad he is, because I don't really think data center companies, who are billionaires, by the way, who could figure out their own desalination, go put it next to the ocean somewhere where no one lives, not in the middle of a community that's already missing water and being told to ration their showering, for goodness sake. So I'm actually glad that those agendas are being challenged. And it's really, really disgusting think that it isn't happening more often. And so talk to us about what sort of conversations you've been having this weekend around some of these things where people actually see it for what it is rather than just reading, political slop.
Well, there has been an absolute flurry of activity, and the momentum is shifting rapidly, Maria. I would say about 5 days ago, Ed Gallerin was, it was a pretty tight race. We have some internal polling that we're looking at, and it's not terrible, but it's way tighter than it should be for a candidate like Tom Massie, who has such a high approval rating in his district, and we're in the 4th district of Kentucky. Since we have come down here, we've deployed so many creators, influencers, broadcasters, podcasters, and we've just been pushing out content. We had an amazing opportunity to visit with Tom Massie and his family at his home yesterday. And so you're going to be seeing some amazing content coming out. I was able to talk to his wife and his daughter and his grandchildren and his wife's sisters, and
he made us pizza, homemade pizza. Yeah.
If you walk into this home that is a home, it's beautifully lived in. It isn't pretentious. It's he built it with his own hands. And there's something very real, very organic, and very genuine about Tom Massie and everyone that surrounds him. So in the time that we've been here, we've been able to close the gap about 4 points. We're looking internally. You're going to see polling coming out from Polymarket saying that Ed Gallerin has a 10-point lead over Thomas Massie. We know that Polymarket has Donald Trump Jr. sitting on the board. We know that a small handful of big money bettors are coming in and they're putting their money down on Ed Gallerin. In fact, there's a rumor out there, a lot of people here who engage with Polymarket have tried to place bets for Tom Massie, and they have been reporting to me. Now, this is just, I haven't confirmed it yet, but they're saying that they're not able to place bets for Tom Massie. So it looks as if the billionaire class, Polymarket, is not only trying to suppress the young voters by pushing out fake propaganda that it doesn't matter, your vote doesn't matter, Ed Gallerin has already won. It also appears that we're looking at yet again another pump and dump from Trump's allies, where they're going in and messing with Polymarket and defrauding people. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that because it's very important. But regardless, we are swinging. We have now, and in the internal polling in Real Clear Politics, we've seen a 3 to 4% swing since we got in here. So the momentum is growing. The energy is with Tom Massie, and we're really optimistic that this is going to go our way. But the bottom line, Maria, is this. Many people accuse Tom Massie of being not getting anything done, being an obstructionist, saying no. Well, I'll tell you what, Tom Massie is standing on the side of the American people. He does say no. He said no to lockdowns in 2020. He said no to endless wars in Iran. He said no to immunity for chemical companies and pharmaceutical companies and AI. He stood up and said no to data centers and immunity for that. Thomas Massie stood up and said no to burying and suppressing the Epstein files as he stood up for the victims of this same billionaire class. So we need Thomas Massie in Congress. This is not just a Kentucky thing. He can effectively block these things, and he's been doing that now for the past 6 months as he builds his coalition. Lauren Boebert took a huge risk in coming down here to stand with him. She's now being attacked by the same organization and this administration for standing up for her friend. We had Matt Gaetz who came out to support Thomas Massie. Yesterday, Rand Paul was with us. Bigger and bigger voices are coming out and realizing that we need him in Congress, not just for the good people of Kentucky, but for America. And so we need these bigger voices. We need MAHA. We need the medical freedom community. Huge platforms, hundreds of millions of followers and influence in the MAHA community, and they're not saying anything. We need them to start talking. So if you're watching right now and you know your favorite MAHA platformer, your favorite medical freedom doctor, they have big platforms on Substack and X. Send them a message, send them a note, say, we need your voice because this guy is standing for you. So I'll shut up, but we need all hands on deck right now. We still need to raise money for him. He has gone into debt to fund these ads, to raise money against these. So you guys can go to his website and donate there. It's the MassieMoneyBomb.com, the MassieMoneyBomb.com.
And I will say that we have a large amount of people actually coming in today to door knock. And like I said, I voted for Trump. And I understand what he ran on. And I remind people when they think that he's a grandstander and votes against, he's voting against the infringement on our medical freedom and civil liberties. But what I've given a lot of people that are door knocking is a document I made that actually shows what Trump ran on. And then I say, do you realize that Thomas Massie for years, for over 10 years, has tried to get those same things through Congress and it was blocked by establishment Republicans? So in essence, Trump stole Thomas Massie's fight, which was great. And that's why a lot of libertarians crossed over to support Trump in 2024. So when you're told that he's abandoning, let's talk about who abandoned what. And it sure wasn't Congressman Thomas Massie.
Absolutely.
Great points. Can't disagree with you at all on there, on any of that, because I'm genuinely disturbed by this sort of loyalty to a person concept. I think JD Vance even gave a speech which some people have described as Stalinist, where it's like Thomas Massie deserves to be attacked essentially because he turned on President Trump. And I just think, what is the political system? Is it representation of your constituents who, again, spent their time and money to elect you to represent them, or is it loyalty to a person who is not actually fulfilling their campaign promises? I don't understand this inversion. It's highly disturbing to me, but I am extremely grateful for people like both of you who are going out there to stand up for really what I see as right, and again, a true referendum on American politics and the future of it. I just want to close on one thing, because I saw the footage that came out of you all visiting Thomas Massie's house. I saw the greeting with Bobby Sauce, who is I consider a friend. And watching Massie give him a hug and leap as he's in his arms, it was so cute. Here's a picture of a meeting that I had with Thomas Massie when I first got here. And let me tell you something. I'm not from Kentucky. I was obviously from another country. I'm living in Texas, but I spoke to Thomas Massie in my capacity as a journalist who's been reporting on American politics and issues facing Americans for a very long time from abroad, because I focus globally. Anyway, he listened to me, very quickly realized that I know what I'm talking about. I'm not tooting my own horn here. It's just that I'm deeply involved in politics and bills and legislation and things of this nature. He listened to what I had to say, paid serious attention to it, and in real time spoke to me about things that he was going to do to safeguard the American people, knowing that that was my concern. This is my first meeting with him as someone from not only from outside of his district, but outside of the country. Now that people could say, oh, well, what are you, a foreigner, doing talking about this? He could see that I cared about America. He could see that I realized that this was the last stand. He could see I knew a thing or two about the Constitution and legislation, and he took the time to listen. Now, I say all of that to say, in my experience, this is a person who genuinely listens to the concerns of people and means it when he listens and takes action in response to what you've said to him, if it lines up with constitutional principles, right? If it lines up with, and that is so important, because I see a trashing of the Constitution by so many so-called Republicans. I don't even know what half of them are doing. They're bringing in digital ID. That's their number one focus. So, sorry for that little monologue there, but I'm really, really grateful to both of you. Kristen, I'd love to have a more detailed conversation with you at some point on data centers to give people tangible things to take to their city meetings. But for now, I think the focus is making sure that this person who is representing the people is going to get reelected. Any final words you want to say there?
I would just say we need to have the mascot that represents true health freedom and how this country is supposed to be ran on. And that's, sorry, we're outside. There's so many bugs. But just remember that Thomas Massie, his votes are determined on, is it constitutional? Can we afford it? And is this better handled at the state or federal level? That is very simple. And that is not an ideological aspect that should ever be trashed as being called a traitor or a grandstander. And it's ironic that people find anything this last 10 days to ruin his character based on false accusations. And just remember, the timing should be quite telling within itself. So like Shannon said, so many of us came here on our own dime. It's for a reason. It's not for our own social media growth or clout. We're here to activate other people to get down here and to document the start of the new revolution, the Ron Paul 2.0 revolution.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I would say, Maria, in closing, that if you are in the 4th District of Kentucky or adjacent to the 4th District of Kentucky, we need you. We need your support. You need to get out and vote, but not just vote yourself. You need to go to your neighbors, your mom, your dad, your grandma, your grandpa, your friend, anyone that you can get, bring them to the polls. We're going to be having boots on the ground. We're going to be door knocking for the next 2 days. And if you're outside of Kentucky and you want to help, we are still raising money. Anyone who can talk to their legislators there, talk to, their members of Congress, all their friends, come in, retweet these posts, push out the social media. We need as many eyeballs on this as humanly possible, because the bottom line is this: the billionaire class, the Epstein class, the deep state, big pharma, big tech, big chemical, the uniparty, they are trying to steal our country, our elections, our democratic process, our representatives. And they have the biggest campaign that they are deploying is right here in the state of Kentucky. We have to tell them, we have to prove to them that they can't do this here. We need to defeat them. And so that's why we need everyone on board. But Maria, thank you so much for giving us this time. I know the mission was data centers, and I think that we touched on that, but this is urgent, man. And we need everyone's help.
Voice and exposing the real issues with them. So I will gladly come back. I'll bring my colleague in this fight with me. Maria, thank you for having us and letting us intertwine them into how Massie's voice has helped protect us, and losing him would be absolutely detrimental to health freedom and to just individual liberty overall.
The two are intertwined. They're absolutely intertwined. We need people we need politicians who will protect the people. So that is of paramount importance right now. I want to direct people to Shannon Joy on X at Shannon Joy Radio. You can also catch her on Rumble. TheShannonJoy.com is where you can go as well. Kristen Meghan at Kristen Meghan. And also a huge shout out to Tiffany Cianci at the Vino Mom, who has done such an incredible job with all of this. I am wishing all of you and Thomas Massie the utmost success to prove to the billionaire class and the Epstein class and the pharmaceutical giants and big ag and all of them that the will of the American people still matters, and that the Constitution matters, and that you just can't simply buy the will of the people. I mean, that is, we are human beings with integrity and dignity, and we deserve to be treated as such. So hopefully people will re-elect a man who does exactly that. Thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maria.
History shows a consistent pattern. When money can be created without limits, or when companies issue more shares and dilute ownership, purchasing power almost always goes one way: down. That's the system most people are in today, and it's why many families are turning to gold and silver, assets with limited supply that have historically held their value. The question most Americans have is how to transition away from declining dollars. And that's where Genesis Gold Group comes in. They've helped thousands of families move a portion of their savings into physical gold and silver through structured strategies, including converting existing retirement accounts like IRAs and 401ks into precious metal IRAs. Rated 4.7 out of 5 stars by faithful investors, Genesis Gold offers a straightforward, personalized process designed to align with each individual's long-term financial goals. Right now, they're offering a free wealth protection guide that walks you through gold and silver investing options step by step. You can get it now at dailypulsesilver.com. That's dailypulsesilver.com. To be clear, we are not telling anybody who to vote for. The aim of this broadcast was to state the facts and challenge some of the media and social media rhetoric about the candidates you're being presented with. There have been unbelievable lies spread about Thomas Massie, for example. We've all heard Thomas Massie votes with Democrats over 90% of the time, or whatever figure they pull out. Well, that is demonstrably, provably untrue. And if you haven't noticed, the side supporting Massie isn't spreading lies about Ed. Really, they've just highlighted what his stated policies are, which, by the way, includes bringing back mandatory military service for the youth of this country. Now, obviously, I personally support Thomas Massie, as do the people out there in Kentucky, but what I believe all of the people involved in this current Kentucky battle are saying is get out and vote. Whoever you're voting for, just get out and vote, because traditionally, particularly the youth, don't turn up for primaries. Every vote right now counts. Please make sure to follow us on Rumble if you're not already. We broadcast every weeknight at 7 p.m. Eastern. Zeee Media is the channel where you can find us. If you want to support us to continue being able to do true independent journalism, the best way to do that is to support our sponsors. All of their links are in the description below. Fantastic businesses that we love to be partnering with, who actually care about our collective future. You can also subscribe to Rumble Premium as content creators on the platform. It does help us out. You also get an ad-free experience. You can click that button right under this video. We'll be back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern. Good night.